Hey everyone, it's Nick from Nick's Crossing. Welcome to the train room for another great post-war review. So here we go everyone, all aboard. So for today's review, we're going to be looking at a classic locomotive. That's right here. And that is the Lionel 681 S2 turbine from the 1950s. So before we get into the review, I would like to go over some of the history of the S2. This is a very interesting locomotive, and there's only one, number 6200. So the S2 is a very iconic locomotive, and unfortunately it's no longer here with us. The engine was scrapped in the early 1950s, I believe 1952, and sat in a yard for about 2 years. So I think it was retired in 1949, sat at the Altoona Works, totally scrapped. So we don't have any evidence of this beautiful locomotive to this day to look at and appreciate. Very similar to the S1. But this engine's insane. It was actually rolled off the assembly line 1944, created by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in conjunction with Westinghouse. They put their minds together and made this crazy 20-wheel, just majestic machine. Now, the turbines, basically how it works, the water was superheated, so you put it through a superheater, push back into the boiler, nice bell pair firebox, of course, Pennsylvania Railroad, got to have that bell pair firebox that we know and love today. That steam was then forced through many, many fins that would eventually spin, and it was saying up to 6,900 horsepower. So it says 9,000 RPM. So think of your Dremel tool, multiply that times 3 at your highest speed. That's how fast the turbine's spinning. Generate 6,900 horsepower. Now in reverse, it did a little bit under that, 1,500 horsepower at 8,300 RPM. So it's much more efficient in forward gear at higher speeds, and that's what kind of killed this locomotive off. The locomotive was extremely efficient at high speeds. It actually tested going 110 miles per hour between two different points, but at slower speeds, around 30 and under, the engine would just cause an overheat for the firebox, which is very bad for a steam locomotive, and also the efficiency would just drop. Now, mechanically, this locomotive was 97% efficient according to the Westinghouse and Baldwin locomotive statistics, which is very impressive. But conventional locomotives at slower speeds, 30 and under, were much more efficient at the time. Now, that was one complaint. This thing actually smoked like crazy. It had 4 stacks on it. So the Lionel variation we'll be looking at today has 1 stack, but you can kind of see 4 little mounts where 4 stacks would be, but your more expensive models have 4 stacks. So this thing would smoke like crazy at slow speeds. And they actually put smoke deflectors, also known as elephant ears, on the side like that. Kind of like your Challengers, UP Challengers. And also some K4s had them, I believe, during World War II. It was kind of like a decorative thing, and the Pennsylvania Railroad used them for experimentation only. They weren't too sure on how well they would work. So 6200 was actually featured at the 1948 World's Fair next to the mighty T1. Can you guys believe that? 2 PRR extinct locomotives is sitting there at the World's Fair, ready to be ran. Not sure if they brought a treadmill with them. I know the Pennsylvania Railroad was very famous for testing locomotives in Altoona on a custom-built treadmill, which is just awesome and crazy and insane. But they brought both of those there for display, probably to show the mighty power of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Sadly, in 1949, 6200 suffered catastrophic failures, and I have a hunch on why that happened. So the engine was actually built to withstand boiler pressure of 310 psi, which is the running psi. Now at slower speeds, I'm assuming because it's using more steam, the boiler pressure would drop down to 85 psi. 85 psi, that's absolutely insane. And I'm assuming that expansion and contraction of the boiler really put a hurting on this locomotive, on top of the firebox temperature just skyrocketing at lower PSIs. So that's my hunch on why this locomotive was most likely at a failure point, and eventually it was scrapped at the Altoona Works in 1952. So it sat outside for 2 years, and then sadly scrapped. So even though number 6200 is no longer with us, we're able to enjoy these locomotives whenever we want and where we want because of Lionel, all the way back in 1946, creating the first turbine, the 671, which came out in 1946, and replacing that in 1950 we have the 681, which is what we have on the tracks today to show you guys up and close. And then other models, you have the 682 and also the 2020, which are all very popular with collectors. So this engine, like I said, 1950, and it has magma-traction, which is the main improvement with this locomotive, and also has the bowl smoker unit that would use smoke pellets instead of using the smoker bulb that I believe the 671 has. So I ended up getting this 681 at the Great Scale Model Train Show. Yeah, I bought a toy train at a model train show. It's just kind of funny. I got it for 75 bucks. It was in much worse shape than you guys see it right now. But the gentleman selling it, he's like, man, it'll clean up great. They're classic, you know. He's like, I promise it works, it smokes, everything's fine. So when I first got her home, of course, every post-war engine I buy, I tear it open, see what mystery is on the inside. And it just needed some cleaning and some rewiring here and there. And I also upgraded the smoke unit to liquid smoke, which I know a lot of you guys will say, you know, it decreases the value and all of that. But I noticed that the smoke pellets were actually oozing out. So here, I'll show you guys here, and then I'll show you a picture of what it looked like before. So the smoke fluid was actually coming out of here, going down to the truck, and actually destroying the pilot. So it's kind of polished over, but the pellet residue was actually corroding the pilot. So I didn't want that. I just like wanted to clean it all up. And then on the inside, here's a picture of the inside. And it's clear whoever had this engine before loved and adored this engine, ran it everywhere, and it was just smoke residue everywhere. But I cleaned it all up and it runs like a top now. It's a great runner. Just had to do a little bit of work here and there. And then once everything was done, I actually polished the shell and protected it with WD-40. Didn't use that on the inside. I just use it on the outside shell, so you get this nice polished gleam on it, just like right off the factory floor, and helps preserve the cast. So we're gonna go trackside and check out the 681 up and close. All right, so I moved her across the pond here, and on the side we have the 6-wheel pilot, 8-wheel drive, 6-wheel, all 20 wheels on the track ready to roll. Now they do give this really cool handrail, it goes all the way back, all the steam and smokestack details. And up here, this is where your 4 stacks would have been. Said Lionel gives you 1, so you have to use your imagination a little bit. Totally fine. Up front, you have the superheater, the water superheater, that with this engine was actually outfitted with. And this engine was also outfitted with 2 compressors for the braking system of this locomotive. And in the back, we also have a ladder down here, separately applied, and then just all these stamped details. It's just a beautiful cast locomotive. Now in the back, the tender is not original. This is actually a Williams tender that came with my 2020 turbine, which I'll show you guys in a second here. But this locomotive would have come with a 267W tender or a 2046W-50 Pennsylvania tender. And also there's a 602W tender normally found with the locomotives number 2020 Variation D. Now all these can be found on Tandem Associates website, and this is the only tender I have that really matches up with this locomotive. But anyways, here's the operations of the locomotive. So we'll do a little test here with the 3-position E unit. So right now we're in reverse, neutral, and forward. And then we'll bring her back. This engine just runs extremely smooth, and it's definitely broken in. Doesn't really have much of a waddle, but it is a great runner. Here's my first turbine I ever received. This is a Williams turbine that came with that tender, and it's a great engine, runs amazingly well, and it actually takes off as soon as you give it power and forward, and has a 3-position E unit. But my main complaint with this engine is the whistle. Yeah, definitely not my favorite whistle, and the bell kind of sounds like someone hitting a piece of metal with a hammer. Yeah, not the best. Alright guys, so 681 is ready to pull. I have heard one complaint while running these locomotives, that the front pilot, these guys right here, will actually jump track or jump switches. Now my 681 is perfectly fine. I think it's well distributed. There's enough weight in the metal cast. But my 6200 from Williams hates and eats switches like crazy. So yeah, I have to run it a certain way on the layout under a certain speed. It's kind of a pain. I think it's just from a lighter metal. But this 681 right here, she's a doozy. So we're going to run her All aboard. Alright everyone, that's going to conclude this review of my Lionel 681 turbine, and love running with those passenger cars and that Rail Express agency. I think it all really fits well together. These engines are great. If you guys ever see one, any of the 4 models I mentioned, the 71, the 81, the 82, or the 2020, definitely pick them up. And also, Williams has that 2020 as well. They run so well. My only complaint, again, is that smoke unit that's just kind of uses the, Williams only smoke fluid. So that's my only complaint with those. But I have one. I actually gave one to a friend of mine, and he loves it as well. So they're great running locomotives. If any of you guys are new to the channel, always consider subscribing. Make sure to hit that bell for all so you don't miss railfan content, layout updates, and content just like this. Getting the video one of these really helps out. I love reading your guys' comments. Love to hear if you have one of these. Until next time, everyone, happy railroading. We'll see you next time.